first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Margie Rafferty-Crichon. I've got children that span many decades and have been in the Middletown school system for a very long time. I'm the PIC chairperson. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the PIC page, where all the information for all of my PIC members, as well as all of my parent organization president information is listed, which is a great way to get in touch with each other. So welcome back and welcome aboard to our new members. And I'd also like to acknowledge that this is Superintendent Walker's first meeting with PIC in her new role. So welcome, Superintendent Walker. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you.
And just a few housekeeping items. The Parent Information Committee is meant to be a forum for general concerns from each of the schools represented here, and not a place to bring concerns about individual students. I know it's tough because most sentences will begin with, I have an 8th grader or I have a 3rd grader, and that's okay, as we always speak best when we speak from our own experiences, but please make sure that the issues you bring here are the ones from your parent organizations or the parents in your schools. And finally, if you haven't already, please familiarize yourself with the PIC website. It's where the agendas, the videos of the meetings, and any notifications or links to pertinent information will be posted. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Chris Rotolo for his invaluable help to make that possible. Thank you, Chris. And with that, we are ready to begin the new school year, and let's head on board to our first agenda item, which is the COVID-19 district protocols and the phased opening. I'll turn it over to Devin and Pat.
All right, good morning. So yeah, we start with the fun topics. That's on everybody's mind anyway. So what are we doing with COVID-19 procedures and then our phased reopening plan? So Mr. Ranella is off on another assignment, and so I'm hoping that he'll be back for the second half, so I just bumped his slides later. And then I rearranged my slide deck a little bit to start on what we are doing as a district when it comes to COVID-19 in our schools. And so Mr. Rotolo, if you want to get that presentation started, that would be great. And I'll just kind of keep talking. But the idea for me was to think about how are we reacting to COVID-19 when it is in our schools, or or when we are concerned about a student or a staff member who may be exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19. So as you are all very well aware, there are lots of procedures and policies that have changed this year because of our response to the pandemic. So I didn't really include a lot of those. And if you've got specific questions, by all means, pop them up into that chat box. But for now, we'll at least talk about what's happening when there is COVID in our schools. So the first topic is what happens when we have a symptomatic student or staff member. So as you all know, we have those health screener forms that everyone is filling out in the mornings. It's filled out by every student and every staff member. So if anybody's experiencing 2 of those minor symptoms or 1 of the major symptoms of COVID-19, that person we're hoping is not reporting to school and not reporting to a building. And then if they do, or if they start to experience a symptom, then they are sent to a separate space in the building. So we're not using our nurse's office for this. We're using what is referred to as an isolation space. And that way the only people who ever enter that space are nurses or an adult who is supervising a student or a staff member who may be exhibiting symptoms, and then the students who are symptomatic themselves. So the nurse will screen the student, make sure that they are experiencing the symptoms that were reported, and then we call parents and release them straight from there. Just be aware that there's always been that policy that if a student is vomiting or has diarrhea, they are sent home, even if it's their only symptom. The difference there is that they're not specifically treated as having symptoms of COVID-19. They have a different reentry protocol. So once a student or staff member is released from the building, then what happens is we actually close off any classrooms that person was in for about 24 hours. Those classrooms are closed for 24 hours so that everything can sit and settle, and then the cleaning crew will come in and they will clean very thoroughly and then disinfect everything. And then right after that disinfection happens, students and staff can re-enter that room. But it's closed for 24 hours before the cleaning, then it's cleaned, and then everybody else can come back into the room and we can reopen it. So when we know that students were in multiple classrooms, that does mean that multiple classrooms will need to be closed. So if you have students in a secondary school and they talk about having to use different classrooms during the day, that could be one of the reasons why. And as you know, we have, other reasons why students and staff would be using other classrooms, but that is one of them, and that's one of the precautions that we take when someone is symptomatic. So from there, they go home, and then on the next slide, thanks, Chris. So if you're experiencing symptoms, how do you come back from school? So if you have a negative test and are fever-free for 24 hours without that fever-reducing medicine and your symptoms improve, you're great. Or if you have an alternate diagnosis from a healthcare provider. So we have a lot of students and staff members who are exhibiting symptoms that are COVID compatible, but they're also symptoms of allergies. So we have some of those documents, on file, and we know that it's okay for those students or staff members to be present in the building as long as they're exhibiting their typical allergy symptoms. Or if it's something else, they can give us another note. If it's positive, that person needs to stay home for that 10-day isolation period and then come back when they're fever-free and all of their other symptoms have improved. And then the fourth one, which may be new, it's the bottom right box, the bottom right yellow box on this slide, is what we have seen is that there are parents who don't want to have their children tested for COVID-19, and that's absolutely the parent's choice. But in that case, then we have to treat it as if it's a positive test and that student or staff member and then all of their school-related contacts need to stay home for a 14-day quarantine. So hopefully that's the only new thing that you've seen in here. And this is all Department of Health protocols that we're following. So I did put together on the next slide a little bit of a summary about what happens for people in their various contacts, because there's been a lot of questions about who should go home, who should stay home, who should be tested, who should be treated when there is a case of COVID-19. So for a person who has a case of COVID-19, that's this very left box. And so that person is then placed under what the Department of Health and the CDC refers to as isolation. And I think I have the definition of isolation on my next slide, so I'm not going to review it right now. But that's a 10-day minimum. And then again, that fever-free for 24 hours and then symptoms have improved. If a person is considered a close contact or a household contact with somebody who's positive for COVID-19, that person, that close contact, is placed under quarantine for 14 days at a minimum. You can't test out of that quarantine. So if you have been exposed to a person with COVID-19, quarantine for 14 days, and then as long as there's no symptoms, then you can return to school. Now, if you are a contact of a close contact, there actually is no quarantine. There's no need to stay home, and there's no need to stay out of the buildings. But we have had situations where parents want to keep both children home, and that's perfectly acceptable. We have that option for virtual learning, which I think is a great use of that. So if a parent is concerned that their children may or may not have been exposed to COVID-19, it's an option. But that secondary contact does not require anyone else to quarantine. And then past that, that green level is the safe level. We're saying, as always, self-monitor for symptoms, but there's really no restrictions, no exclusions, nothing to worry about there. All right, so my definitions. A close contact is a person who's been within about 6 feet from a person with COVID-19 for a period of at least 10 minutes, or when they have direct contact with an infectious person in the form of a hug, a kiss, sharing silverware, being coughed on, things where those aerosols would be much easier transmitted to another person. So that's what a close contact is. And when our nurses or the Department of Health contact tracers interview a person, that's what they're asking about is, who would fit that description. So close contacts are notified by the school nurse or a contact tracer from the Department of Health or from the school nurse. as soon as they're identified and the need to quarantine is confirmed. So we don't wait to notify any close contacts. We'll make notification as soon as we know about it. So from there, if we get notification that there's a positive case, we make sure that all of the close contacts are notified. And then when we know that there's that positive case, the district will notify the entire school community whenever there's a lab confirmed case of COVID-19. We do try to wait until that contact tracing is complete, just so that there's no panic. And that is within a matter of hours. It's a pretty short time that we're able to complete all of that contact tracing. So we will continue to notify the entire school community when that happens. There have been a lot of questions about why we don't notify just specific classrooms. Oh,
at this time, students on the second floor may proceed.
I need a volume button in my office for those announcements. So anyway, there's been some, like I said, there's been some questions about who we notify. And at this point, we notify close contacts and the entire school and the entire district whenever there's a case of COVID-19. It would be a breach of privacy if we were going to notify just a classroom or just a subset of people who were not considered close contacts. So just rest assured that we will contact anybody who is considered to be that close contact who needs to quarantine. And anybody else, just self-monitor for symptoms, and don't worry about specific notification beyond that. And then again, the difference between quarantine and isolation, we use the word quarantine to talk about anybody who is excluded from a school building and who's supposed to stay at home. But there is a difference. So people under quarantine are supposed to keep them away from anybody else. But the person under quarantine doesn't have COVID-19 themselves. A person who was diagnosed with COVID-19 would be under isolation, and a person under isolation is supposed to be separate from even everybody in their house to the maximum extent possible. So I tend to use the words quarantine and isolation interchangeably, just to mean stay home and keep yourself safe, but there is technically a difference. And so anybody who is considered a close contact or who reports a positive case will be notified by a school nurse or by our lead nurse and made sure that they know exactly what they need to come back to school and what to do while they are home. And then we do have a re-entry meeting right before they come back to make sure that everybody's feeling well, that all symptoms are gone, and that if they're under quarantine, that no symptoms have appeared. So recently, you have seen that we have had to consult this chart in a couple of different times. The idea behind this chart is, or the source of this chart is the New Jersey Department of Health, and it is part of a guidance document for local departments of health. It's a guidance document for local departments of health and schools and what they recommend for closures. So we consult with the Middletown Department of Health every time we have a case of COVID that's reported in our school community, whether it was identified from a person who was in the building or whether we believe that it was from an outside event. Anytime that it involves any one of our students or staff members, we do consult with the health department about what to do from there. So as you'll see, there are a number of different ways that we could respond to a case of COVID in our schools. The first one being that when there's just one case, the school stays open and then anybody in close contact is excluded for 14 days. We do make notification, and what you have seen in the past is that we have now closed our second building. We have notified as a district just for when there are confirmed cases. There was a school with up to 3 cases, and yet we did not have to close for 14 days, even though it would be, I think it's the 6th one down, where we may have to do that. Because like I said, we do consult with the health department each and every time we have an incident. So with that said, in the case where we had 3 cases in one building, we were able to identify a link between those 3 cases. So we knew exactly how transmission was occurring, and there wasn't a concern about an outbreak in the building. So as you have seen from our latest correspondence, there was a second case of COVID that was reported in the New Monmouth Elementary School. And so just to briefly touch on that for a moment, we are working to identify a link between those two cases. And if we know that there's a link, then we can keep the school, or we can reopen the school as of later this week. Right now, we're still investigating. We're still going through all of that contact tracing and working with the families and with the health department and the administration, and we have been trying to find that link to see if we can keep the school open. And if we can't, then we are likely going to have to close the school for that 14-day period, just to make sure that if there was anybody else exposed, that we wouldn't be endangering anybody else's health. As of right now, no other cases have been reported. So we're hoping that it was a very isolated incident, and we just had 2 isolated cases of COVID-19, but we are still investigating that to see what's going to happen next. And as soon as those decisions are made, they are communicated to the district community. Mrs. Walker, did you want to mention anything else about that one, since it's an ongoing?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to say that, if we can't find that connection, even though it's only 2 cases, we may have to close down, go into, close the building and go to virtual instruction for 14 days. But we are working with the health department, our local health department, who is now contacting the state epidemiologist to just review our case to see, exactly where we stand, to give us a better idea of whether we have to close or whether we can open up later this week. So, that's all ongoing. Hopefully by the end of today or early tomorrow, we will have more answers for that school community. But we just wanted to keep you updated on, what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing in that instance, because it is different than the instance we had earlier this year at Nut Swamp with 3 cases, which all were connected. We knew where they came from, and there was very little, we had already done the contact tracing, and there was little concern that was going to spread within the building. But not knowing any connection is the issue, and that's why it gets heightened to a higher level of closure.
So before we move on to the next segment about our hope for the next phases, do you have any questions about what we are doing as a district when there is COVID-19 reported in our schools, or if there was another question that I can answer again before we move on a little bit?
Yeah, we have a question in the chat box. In response to people that feel like our district has more ability to work outside and around the DOH guidelines, is this accurate, or must we strictly follow Department of Health?
We have to follow the Department of Health guidelines. That's why we're seeking additional guidance from the Department of Health, just to see if there's any wiggle room. But we ourselves can't, make that decision. We're not the experts in epidemiology. We would be taking risks that we don't have the knowledge, the experience to actually determine, whether these are risks that we should be taking. So we do follow their guidance. We work very, very closely with the local health department. And again, also, we reach out to the state in certain instances, like with, if school closures are possible, for a lengthy time. We're not just going to look at this chart. We're going to reach out to the state and say, listen, this is our situation. Where does this fit on this chart? We believe right now that it fits on that 6th one down, the 2 or more cases within 14 days across multiple classrooms, and no clear connection that we can see right now. But we're going to go over the entire case with the state so that we get a definitive answer.
Okay, I have another one here. If a child is sent home with assumed positive case and doesn't get tested, what happens?
So that was part of the 4 yellow boxes. That's the new yellow box in the bottom right corner that said that if a child does not get tested, we treat it like a positive case in terms of reentry protocol, but we do not make any sort of notification because it's not a lab confirmed case of COVID-19. So we only make notification if it's lab confirmed. And if it's just an assumption or a possibility of being a positive, we do not. So that child would stay home, and then any siblings would stay home for a period of 14 days just to make sure that there was nothing that was going to appear, but we don't make notification.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm reading through the chat.
Oh, okay.
So
When notifying the community, is there a reason the district cannot share if the positive cases are staff members or students?
It all comes down to privacy laws, and so we can't give out any sort of identifying information about a person's health. So if we were to say that it was a staff member or a student, it would give away some identifying information, and it would be easier to figure out who that person was. And so because we want to respect their privacy, and we have to by law respect their privacy, we can't identify even whether it was a staff member or a student.
Okay. And there's another related question. If there's a pending test by a family member of a student, parent, or sibling, same household, should that child be staying home and not attending sports, say, for example?
So there's not a specific policy or guidance in place for that. I would say that if there are a number of symptoms why a person is getting tested, then the safer route would be to keep everybody home as much as possible. But there is not specifically, that comes into that secondary contact if it was a case where there was a close contact in the middle. So no one else other than the person being tested must stay home, but it would be the safer option if that's possible.
Okay. Right, and another related question, is the definition of close contact for 10 minutes shortened for sports when kids are not wearing masks? And what percentage of assumed positives sent home are not getting tested?
So I can at least address the first part. I would actually have to do some research on the second. I don't have all my statistics in front of me. So when they do close contact, it's actually mask or no mask. So we're saying that the mask is a good precaution to take and it's a great barrier to use. But when we're doing contact tracing, the fact of whether there's a mask present or not does not change that 10 minutes, and it doesn't change the 6 feet either. So if it was kids who are, I see what you're saying. So kids who are in contact with each other for less than 10 minutes at that short distance are still not considered close contacts, whether they're wearing a mask or not.
Okay. And this is an interesting question because all of us have been filling out that form. What are the procedures for someone who has been in a travel advisory state, like say on vacation or, something of that nature?
So the New Jersey guidance right now is that if you have been in one of those travel advisory states, that there is an expectation of a 14-day quarantine. So we are in touch with the family about where that travel occurred, how long the travel occurred for, and then they may even be asking more questions like what sorts of facilities you stayed in or visited. But the typical answer is that if you are in a travel advisory state for more than 24 hours, then you are expected to quarantine for 14 days.
Okay. All right. And we have one last question before we can move on. What is follow-up? What is the follow-up if a parent does not tell the truth on the sports screening form and sends their kid there while there is a symptomatic person at home awaiting a test result?
Unfortunately, we are relying on parents to be honest about all of the screening forms. And so it is very difficult for us to fact check anything that's happening. So our recommendation is that everybody takes precautions to keep themselves safe. Especially high school age kids that are attending sports, my suggestions to them are typically treat everyone like they may be a carrier for COVID-19. Keep your distance where you can, constantly wash your hands, use that sanitizer when you can't wash your hands, don't share water bottles. If you pretend like everyone you're around is possibly sick, then you'll keep yourself a little bit safer. And then in those cases where either we don't know the realities at home, or if a person is carrying a disease and doesn't know about it, then we're still adding that extra layer of precaution.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we continue on with the presentation? We'll hold on the questions for now.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Rinella, are you prepared to continue and talk about the phases? I skipped that part for you.
Sure. I'll give it my best shot. I apologize for coming in a little bit late to the meeting. Do we need to go back to the?
Nope, it should be next.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So just real briefly, kind of going over our phase reopening plan. Currently, we're getting very close to phase 4, which our anticipated start date was October 12th. And during phase 4, this is when we were looking and hopefully going to be able to bring in our academically at-risk students into, mixing the cohorts and increasing the class sizes as far as cohort A and cohort B are concerned. All of this is dependent on, we have a meeting with the local Department of Health tomorrow morning to review all of the data and, the positivity rate and the transmission rate. I can say that, we have done a really good job. The Department of Health has acknowledged that we've done a really good job as far as, maintaining social distance in the schools and really mitigating as much as possible within the school. So we're hopeful that when we have that meeting tomorrow, we're in a spot where we can go to phase 4 and start inviting some of our more at-risk students back into be present in person on campus learning. Moving forward, if we do have that meeting tomorrow and we are allowed to increase the number of students in the classroom and start mixing cohorts, the students, either case manager, guidance counselor, principal, whoever it may be, will be in contact with those families to offer them the opportunity. It doesn't mean that they have to attend. It's just an opportunity for them to begin attending more in-person instruction. And then we are not at the point right now of increasing the length of the day. Right now, we're just focusing on trying to get more students in the building and increasing the class size and mixing cohorts. So the bottom part of that slide there, right now, we're not at the point that we're looking to increase the length of the day or serve lunches right now, but we are looking to bring more students in. So if we could go, Mr. Rotolo, to the next slide there. And then on phase 5, which again, anticipated date was on or around November 16th. Again, depending on, we will schedule another meeting probably the week prior to the 16th of November to review the information and the data with the Department of Health. And this is the opportunity that we will be able to offer those students that had originally elected to do virtual learning, remote learning, give them the opportunity to be able to come back in and start participating with in-person instruction. But again, that all depends on what the data looks like at that time and our communication with the Department of Health. And remember, the reason that we have a phased in approach is so we are, incrementally adding more students into cohorts, into classes. So if we get to a point in phase 4 where the data starts to not look good, we may have to pivot back and take a step back and go, revert back to phase 3. We're hoping that doesn't happen, but I just want everyone to be aware that, at any time we may have to repeat back to one of the original, go back to phase 3 or back to phase 4. Just because we enter one of those phases doesn't mean that we're going to have to, we have the ability to stay there. But those decisions are all going to be made in consultation with the Department of Health. And then at phase 6, again, anticipated start date, December 14th. Again, working with the Department of Health, this is when hopefully phase 6 will be able to have 5 days of instruction for all students, and going back to what was similar or most similar to our normal experience prior to March 13th. Again, though, the last bullet there, it says the school day was, if it was not increased in phase 5, then the district may be able to extend the length of the day. So again, each phase we have the ability, if everything is looking good, to possibly extend the length of the day, but that's not a guarantee. Right now, our focus is to try to get as many kids into the classrooms and participating for 5 full days as soon as possible. Any questions on the remaining 3 phases?
Mr. Ranella.
Can you hear me? Pat, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I do have a question here. It says, if parents are not comfortable with phase 4 and the increase of students in the classroom, can they switch to virtual? And will parents be informed of how many students will be mixing to help them make a decision?
So parents will, throughout the executive order that the governor has in place, allows students at any time to attend remotely. So to answer that question, yes, the parents would be able to elect to have their children go remote, and that's currently happening. Right now, we're still receiving some emails and requests for students that were in person that don't feel comfortable or situations have changed that would like to attend remotely, and we are making that happen, and they would also have the opportunity to do that. As far as sharing the number of students in the classroom, that's something that we have not yet discussed. We don't typically share how many students are in each class. That's not something that we have done in the past, but it's something that I think these times are a little bit different than what we've experienced in the past, so it's something that we can discuss.
But another consideration is that our class sizes, not number of students, but the actual physical size of our classrooms vary not only from building to building, but within buildings. So just giving someone, okay, now you're going to have 14 kids in the classroom is really not going to tell parents that much information. Just putting it out there.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just add,
expand. Go ahead, Ms. Pickett.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manel. I would just add that at that point, exactly what Mrs. Walker just said, the number is going to, in some ways, be irrelevant to social distancing because of the actual physical size of classrooms. I would think what most parents should keep in mind in making that decision is that they should assume that upon entering phase 4, we will not be able to maintain 6-foot social distancing, at all times in the classroom. So if the 6-foot social distancing is the marker or the concern, that's what they should keep in mind, that it likely will not be able to be maintained between students.
Right. That's what I was going to say as well. That's really one of the main points of that meeting with the health department, to see, although we're trying to maintain the 6-foot social distancing, we can't guarantee that, and we never have been able to guarantee that. And there are currently classrooms right now that there's not 6 feet because of the number of students. So to Mrs. Pickett's point, when we bring more students in, I would make the assumption that we are no longer at the 6-foot social distancing mark.
And probably just also good to mention, Pat, that we are exploring alternative options for the classroom setting, such as physical barriers, desk shields, those kind of things, for classrooms where there is limited social distancing, much more limited than what we would perhaps expect to see in like a phase 4. Because we are still trying to achieve social distancing in phase 4. It's just that that's part of the stress test of this whole plan, is that, as Mr. Ranella mentioned earlier, it's reducing the social distancing incrementally in the classroom to see at which point, hopefully never, we may start to experience some problems. And then, as Mr. Ranella mentioned, in that case, if we do start to see any issues with more frequent transmission of COVID or other issues, then we may have to pivot back. So it's kind of like a science experiment at this point in determining that stress point. And hopefully there is none.
And I do have another question here. Will there be any penalties for families that get confused with alternating Wednesdays and don't go in on the appropriate day?
I think I can answer that. Our principals are going to be getting that message out, whether it's a cohort A or a cohort B, every week, just to make sure that everybody knows which day it is. In the beginning, that actually happened, when we first started school, students on, mixing up their cohort days. And just because we're trying to maintain some level of social distancing, those students will be asked to leave. The parents will be called to pick the students up if they come on their day, or not on their day. But the principals are going to be making sure that there's plenty of notification on each day, each Wednesday, as to which cohort should be attending. So hopefully there will be no confusion there.
I'm going to have something to add to that. on the middle school level when it's my turn to speak?
You
I
can
think there's a question there now, Mr. O'Lawson, so it may be,
We have one that says, can those students just stay home instead of going in on Wednesdays? I believe you said it wasn't optional. That phased in was an option, that parents don't necessarily have to send their child in on Wednesday. Is that true, or?
So there's two different things that are, I think, being discussed right now. We have the Wednesday of bringing students in, and that's standalone from the phase 4 of mixing cohorts and increasing class size. So the Wednesday we are bringing students in, on an alternating Wednesday. So cohort A, cohort B, for in-person instruction. That has nothing to do with the phase 4. That's another way that we were able to create opportunities for students to have in-person instruction. So if students choose, I think to answer this question, if students choose not to be attending on Wednesdays, the expectation would be that they would attend remotely and be marked virtually present for that day.
Okay, and one last question before we move forward. It's a little confusing having middle schools following a different AB schedule than high school.
I'm going to address that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we'll hold that question till the next, later in the presentation. Thank you. Okay, looks like we have one more question. Just confirming that the first window for current all virtual.
I think Margie might have frozen.
Yeah.
So I'll answer that. Actually, it's November. It's phase 5. So just want to address that. December 14th is the anticipated date.
December 14th.
December 14th is the anticipated date of phase 6. Phase 5, I believe it's either November 12th or November 14th, but it's phase 5. November date is the first opportunity for students who started the year all virtual to resume in-person instruction in one of their assigned cohorts.
But that would be the 3 days a week, whether 3 days a week, 1 week, 2 days a week, the other. We're still in the cohorts at that point. So they would be entering into a cohort hybrid model. We have not yet entered until December the full model.
Margie, I would just suggest that maybe we move on to the next topic, because I know Mr. O'Lawson was going to address that one question and he has to get to a meeting. So he is pressed for time and he only has a few minutes. So maybe we can move on to the principals. We're going to give an update on the hybrid virtual instruction model.
Sure, let's absolutely move forward.
So
Mr. O'Lawson, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So just to give a quick update on the middle schools, and then I'll go to the AB issue. So in terms of instruction, of course, this has presented a real challenge for teachers, but they're doing it. I spoke to my colleagues, Mr. Scarano, Mr. Curry, and we all concur that, there have been some minor issues in terms of technology and that type of thing, but continuing to adjust and to adapt. And so for the most part, it's really been successful. Just a quick example, I know this has happened at Thorne, of a minor technology issue that we've had is, there's been a bit of a lag time in presentations for students, when they're home. And basically that's been happening with older Chromebooks. So we've just been swapping those out. That's what we kind of found out. And so that's addressing that issue. And that's just a minor issue, but that's pretty much all we've had in terms of issues with instruction and technology. The AB thing is a little bit complicated, but we are going to go back on the middle school level. We did keep the schedule different because of the virtual Wednesdays. We are going to revert back and end up with the same regular rotation of AB schedule as the high schools. That is going to start taking place next week. So we are going to, beginning Monday, Mr. Ranella just actually gave me a late text in terms of what we discussed yesterday. But our plan was to go back to a regular rotation. The way we were doing it, once the cohorts come in, and here the complicated part is you can't confuse cohorts A and B with A and B days, and that's what everybody does. So kind of separate those two things. They're two completely different things. But it would not have worked to continue the way we were doing it on the middle school level with the cohorts actually coming in. They'd end up seeing the same teacher for activity arts and phys ed every week the way we were doing it. But by going back to the regular way we used to do it and connecting to the way the high schools do it on a regular A-B rotation, that will alleviate that problem. So we are going back. To do that, we were going to start with an A day on Monday. The high school has a B day on Monday, but because they have what's called a C day on Wednesday. Oh, Mr. Ranello is shaking his.
Sorry, that's what my text message was for.
Okay.
So on this Wednesday, that first Wednesday that they're bringing students in for in-person instruction, the high schools are doing their PSAT testing. So that will actually be an asynchronous day for the high schools, but it will be a B day.
Okay. So with that said, what we will have to do on the middle school level is start with Monday as being a B day. So we will have a B day Friday, but we'll also start with a B day on Monday, and then we'll be in the regular rotation the same way the high school is. It's very complicated as to why it wouldn't work going forward on Wednesdays, but I think suffice it to say, just getting back to that regular A-B rotation will make it easier for everybody to understand anyway.
I can tell you at the high school level, the students have been very receptive to the fact that we went back to a traditional A-B schedule. It just seems to work. It's much more effective for their schedule. So that's the direction that we decided to go in.
And so that's all I have in terms of the middle school level.
We are synchronous, and I have to tell you, it's been pretty impressive. I've been in classrooms where I see collaboration starting to occur. And that's kind of a tricky thing to make happen. But the students who are virtual are now collaborating with the students who are in person. And I think that as we go on, week by week, the teachers and the students are going to feel more comfortable with this model, and it's going to become even more effective. So I've been very impressed with instruction. I can tell you that there are times, though, if there's a substitute in the room, a teacher's going to have to be home. If they're homesick, they're going to post something on Google Classroom. And at that time, the students who are virtual may need to be asynchronous while the substitute is in the classroom with the students in person working on the work. But any other time, we are expecting synchronous instruction the majority of the time. I need to also say at the high school level, there are some teachers who are out for medical reasons and teaching virtually. We have substitutes in those rooms, and I can tell you honestly that I've had nothing but positive feedback from parents and students about the transition of power, really, with someone at home teaching and the substitute in the room who's helping facilitate the learning process. It has gone well. So I wanted to share that also. Mr. Lawson touched on the technology piece for 1 minute, and I wanted to reiterate or elaborate on that a little bit. We have a process at the high school that's in place where students can sign up on a Google form. If they're having Chromebook issues, they can come down to the main office and swap the Chromebooks. And if you're a virtual student, you can sign up on that form as well and come between 12:30 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, go to the front desk where the security is, and they are helping make that switch as well. So we are trying to support the kids the best we can with the technology. There's naturally going to be issues, but we're addressing them in an effective manner. I also wanted to say some of the hiccups that we've had with technology are related to kids signing on classrooms that they're not supposed to be there. Obviously not a behavior that we're endorsing, but we've been working with Dave Suiak, our technology district technology person, who is helping the teachers come up with solutions to keeping students who aren't supposed to be in those classes out of those particular classes. And those guidelines and procedures have helped us eliminate that problem. It was more of a problem in the beginning. I also wanted to touch quickly on office hours. Office hours have been extremely effective for students who are virtual those days. So teachers in the afternoon are available for office hours for students who are virtual on those days. And it's been a process that has been successful. So we're happy about that. Obviously, we're over a month or about a month into school, so assessments have started at the high school level. The teachers are trying to really switch back and forth. The students who are in person taking the test, maybe one assessment, the students are in person. The next time they take assessment, they're virtual. So all students have the opportunity to take the tests and the assessments in person at some point during the course of the marking period. I know Mrs. Walker and Mr. Ranella will reiterate this at some point if they haven't already. We don't want students to come in when they're sick. That's really, really important. The attendance policy is such an important part of what we do at the high school, but we realize these are unique times and we need to be flexible. So please, if there's any doubt with your student not feeling well, keep them home. We want you to communicate with the guidance counselor, the assistant principals, and the secretaries. Let them know what your situation at home is. It will not be held against your student. Obviously, if there are students who are missing in-person instruction for extended periods of time, and there's no real valid excuse for that, we're going to have a conversation related to possibly having the students go back to virtual instruction full-time. It just might be the best case scenario. But again, if you're not feeling well, we want you to stay home, communicate those issues with us, and we'll certainly make it work. And also, one more thing really to reiterate, the communication is such an important part of where we are right now. Make sure your children are reaching out to their teachers and to their guidance counselors. If they need to speak with their assistant principal or another administrator, the communication piece is very important to make sure this continues to be successful. So thank you for your buy-in and your support during these first few weeks. Things have been going well at the high school. I'll turn it over to Mr. Paulson now.
So there was a question that I could actually answer because I kind of dealt with it for the first time this week, which was about substitutes and how's it going. I could tell you that I had my first teacher out with just an unexpected family issue. And luckily, the Board of Ed was nice enough to give us all subs in our building that have been here from the beginning and received a lot of the same training that our teachers did. And we created specific email accounts so that if a teacher is out for the day, they can have them signed up in their Google Classroom so they can manage it. There is more of an emphasis, like Mr. Kirkpatrick said, on days like that where it might look more asynchronous. But at the elementary level, there will be some synchronous opportunities, especially that first morning meeting, because we will be taking attendance there, obviously. And it's worked out very well. So as far as the subs, comparing it to years prior, I would actually say it's been an improvement because we've quickly been able to give our substitutes, I guess, some enhanced professional development so that they can be caught up to speed with what our teachers are doing. So the quality of what our subs are doing right now is far superior than years past. And having them in the buildings and almost like a regular staff member so they know what's going on. And if we have an absence that's been planned by a teacher for whatever it may be, a doctor's appointment or whatever it may be, we can connect the sub and the teacher prior to that day so that way we don't miss a beat. So to answer that question from Ms. Kanapka, that's been my experience here at Harmony, and I'm sure some of my colleagues at the different buildings would agree with that.
Mr. Paulson, I'll have to agree, and I think that you'll agree that the HR department has done a tremendous job working with building administration to ensure that we have enough substitutes when needed, backup, and really supporting us. Because one of our biggest concerns is the fact that, we come into school one day and we don't have enough teachers to supervise students. That's a nightmare that would keep you up awake at night, whether you're a district level administrator or a building principal. So not only has HR been so supportive, but we have backup plans also. If there's ever an issue where we were short subs, we have plans in place that would ensure that the students are supervised.
Yeah, and one of the things that I know everyone wanted to talk about was really about the equity of virtual learners as opposed to in-person learners. And to kind of piggyback off what Mr. Kirkpatrick said, in every classroom you're seeing synchronous instruction throughout the day at some point. There is asynchronous activities that are going on, but at any given point during the day, you're going to be live with students that are home and with students that are in class. So the connections that we cherish in our profession, which is that in-person connection, you're getting it, although there's a barrier, which is the screen. You're still getting it with those students. And I would say that it's been very equitable across the board for all students. Now, if there are issues, though, which we know there's going to be, we just ask that you immediately reach out to that teacher and let them know what's going on. And I always tell parents, be specific, and try not, and this is hard, and this is even hard for myself as a father of 4, try not to let the emotions and the anxiety come out as much as let's be factual and stick to what we can solve and resolve together. There's a whole lot of things that we're concerned about, but what could we really focus on to make the experience better? Or what do we have influence over to make it better for that child, especially if they're virtual full time? I would advocate to anyone that I think we're doing a really great job, and sending your kids in. It's a leap of faith, but having seen this in action now for over a month, I'm confident in how safely we're doing this. And I think that our phased-in approach, when I compare it to other districts and even my children's own district, it's just a smart, methodical move with precise steps. So that's been the positive aspects that I've seen going on here. The one thing I would always say, though, is, and this is hard as a parent when you're sitting at home all day, I hear this from my wife constantly, is when your children get upset at home, how do you support them? And at that point, that's when you want to let the teacher know exactly what's going on. We don't want this to be a frustrating process. We certainly want to challenge our students. If you've taken education classes, we want to push them to that zone of proximal development, we call it, which is challenging them, but we don't want to frustrate them, especially adding that layer of frustration is not needed. So communicate with your teachers. That's the key component to this virtual learning. And we joked about it last year because we didn't think we'd be in it this long, but it truly takes a village to do what we're doing here. And it's, as a parent myself, we've been asked a lot, and I can't applaud the parents enough for their support in all of this. It's truly, it cannot be done without you, especially I know at the lower grades. When you're dealing with a preschooler and a kindergartner, or even a first or second grader, oftentimes you're there helping them navigate, and that's something that you've never had to do before, and you've kind of stepped up and become like pseudo staff members at home. So we thank you for that. And our hope is that we get some good news, and we can keep moving through our phases and increasing what we're doing safely. And that's really at the elementary level, it's pretty consistent with the other 2 levels as well. You're seeing a lot of synchronous and asynchronous activities. There was some discussion about special areas. I know that in any model, you're going to have pros and cons to everything. One of the things that we were able to do is because of some of the vacancies, we've had to move some people around early in the year. But each of the, I can use Spanish as an example. Right now we have 2 staff members pushing out virtual lessons for all of our students at the elementary level, and they are doing an amazing job. I think it's Mrs. Siebert, I forget, I think it's Conlin is her name. I'm not 100% sure, but Senora Siebert's been at my building. That's why I could speak to her. But the lessons they're putting out, and because a lot of their work is asynchronous because they're pushing out to all the elementary schools, it has been upwards of what you would see like on a Khan Academy episode or something like that, where you're getting a solid 20 to 30 or 40 minutes of instruction and activity, even interaction with a pre-recorded lesson that's at a caliber that they would get in the classroom as well. I know that the hardest part that I'm hearing from parents with special areas is that we're asking kids to do that at home after they eat their lunch, They go home, they leave here, and that's when they're doing their specials. That is a challenge, I'm not going to lie, and that's probably the one casualty is how does a parent get their child motivated to want to do that? And sometimes we just have to, even if our child doesn't want to do it, we have to say, all right, we're doing this. This is part of your schooling. And I can say the quality of work that's in the special area classrooms is definitely right on par with what you're seeing in the regular ed classrooms. And I think that even the things that we are offering live, which a lot of the phys ed teachers have been doing live interactive sessions, especially on Wednesdays, have been just transformational, I think, almost changing the face of what our special area classes look like. So it's truly been a unique experience watching that content area evolve, because they're dealing with a much larger scope of students across all the elementary levels. So I applaud those teachers because there's fewer of them, and they're putting out way more content right now than they were last spring. But the content is certainly on par for everything that we've been expecting of our teachers. And I'm happy to report that, because I can, again, speak to my experiences from my children in other districts, and that's not always the case. So hats off to our teachers here in Middletown. We certainly, they have stepped up to the bar and really done an excellent job maintaining the synchronous and asynchronous expectations that we've set on them, and to the parents, because that takes a huge amount of management. I know that part of my wife's day is just alarms going on and off for different meet times, and so thank you all for all that. And then outside of that, Ms. Pickus, Ms. Walker, I didn't have anything else. I didn't know if there was anything you wanted me more specifically to touch on. I didn't see any questions in the comments.
Can I just add something? I think we all want to echo Eric's support or Eric's comments about, all that the parents have done to support this whole process. We know that this is this is a different time in education, and the part parents play has always been important, but never more important than it is right now. We also echo how hard our teachers are working. I mean, from last spring when they pivoted to virtual and, did such a great job, with a totally new way of teaching. Again, in September, we asked them to do something new, to teach in person and synchronously to, virtual students at the same time. Again, they stepped up. The amount of work that they're doing to make that happen and make it successful is amazing. To our principals, the work they did all summer to plan, and then now the implementation it's day-to-day problem solving, finding new solutions, finding better ways to do things. Everyone's job has become different. Everyone's job has, really made us think a lot more, made us, not necessarily like they're working harder, but the amount that they're doing in terms of problem solving and finding ways to make education better is just amazing. And even our central office team. I did want to welcome Mrs. Orozco in her new position. Kim, what is the exact title? She's Director of Staff Development and Special Projects. Is that right? Okay.
Correct. So a lot of people on the call may remember, if you were with us last year or in previous years, Mrs. Shaw, Mrs. Alphone, Jessica Alphone, served as Director of Staff Development and Special Projects, overseeing areas such as Title I, Linkit, those types of district-wide responsibilities, ESL. For anybody who doesn't know, Mrs. Alphone was appointed as Superintendent of Monmouth Beach Elementary over the summer, and Mrs. Orozco indicated she was interested in broadening her experiences in the district. She previously served, a lot of you have seen Devin here with us in the past, when she came to speak about science, health, and physical education topics. So as the director of those subject areas, and really a timely thing, for us is that the virtual instruction and the impact of the current health emergency on school districts really kind of lends itself to Devon's background as a science teacher. You could just tell by her presentation earlier, she really understands contact tracing and health-related matters. So that's really been an asset for the district. So yes, Ms. Orozco is now serving as Director of Special Projects and Staff Development. And Mr. Siegel, some of you may know Mr. Siegel from High School South. He was appointed last month as the new Director of Science, Health, and Physical Education, and he'll be transitioning to that role when we have Mr. Kirkpatrick is working with Mrs. Orozco and Mr. Siegel on securing a replacement for him as in his assignment at High School South.
And I also want to welcome Mr. Pat Ranella as our new Assistant Superintendent. As you know, Mr. Ranella served in the District Director role prior to that, and before that, he served as the principal of High School South. He was also an administrator as an assistant principal at one time at High School South and a math teacher at Thompson. He has a long history in Middletown. We're very excited to have him working at the central office level. Between, Devon working, with us now, especially with the, the health emergency that's going on right now, and Mr. Ranella, this is a really strong team to support our principals who are doing a fantastic job in supporting their staff, who are doing a fantastic job in supporting their students, and parents also supporting the students in the education. So I think this whole district is really working together to make this work, and it is working. We really do believe that we are being very successful in the educational component and the health component.
So I'm just going to circle back. I'm looking at the chat, and there was a couple things that came up. And Mr. Paulson, I'll piggyback on some of what you were saying, and feel free to add any more detail if needed. But we are going to continue, as we move through the phases. The elementary principals and I will be, and the directors overseeing arts and health and phys ed in Spanish, we will work to build a schedule for our specials to ensure that there's consistency, that is critical to us as well. As we extend more opportunity for in-person instruction and students resume attending on-campus instruction more frequently throughout the week, we're going to look to build, more opportunity for them to interact with the special subject teachers. Right now, they are conducting wellness breaks. So they are really trying. A lot of people keep saying, well, it's just a mask break. It's really not. Our wellness breaks at the elementary level were very strategically planned to allow for interaction with our special subject teachers, especially our health and phys ed teachers, where we thought it was most important that students get physical activity during the day. It's funny, we've heard from both sides of the topic, in opinion with regard to should students just be receiving direct, instruction in core content areas like language arts, math, science, and social studies versus getting recess time and or wellness breaks, like our special time with our special subject teachers. We've had parents express different views on that. But we are trying to find a balance, and that's what we want everyone to understand. We're trying to do what's best for the students. They do need those breaks to not be sitting at their desks and be participating in other types of learning and movement. So we will be working on that. And then Mr. Paulson, I see there's a question here. Will students who don't complete specials be penalized? That's not my understanding.
No.
We're making the instruction and the content available to students. That's what is important here. When they have the opportunity, when there's time to engage with that instruction, they should be doing that, but there will be no penalties. And then I think there's a question here. It's a little bit more of a non-academic one about school pictures.
I could, well, the as far as being penalized, absolutely not. Again, it's about exposing your children right now to some of the content. And if you're concerned about some of the activities, certainly reach out to the teacher that has posted that material, or even your building principal. In terms of pictures, a lot of us, when we plan our picture day at the elementary level, and I'm sure it's at the same at the middle and high school, we book those back in the spring. And a lot of us book them in September, October to get them finished. A lot of the companies that we work with reached out to us even prior to the year asking what is our model of instruction and how are we doing it, and hence needing more days to complete pictures. I know at the elementary level, most of us pushed it back to the January area. I know that at our level, we're still working with B&L for the elementary level. And I know that as of my discussion with B&L last week, when I rescheduled mine, they have rescheduled almost everyone in our district for something in the January timeframe. Which also brings you to, I think, the question below that. I'm not going to skip over the second half of that, which was yearbooks and things like that. Yearbooks at the elementary level, yearbooks are usually done by parent groups. And basically, we checked with the yearbook company that we've used in the past, and the time frame for that to be completed with school pictures will be in plenty of time if we do our school pictures in January, which, I mean, our hope is that we're beyond all of this in January. Obviously, that's yet to be determined, but yearbooks, honestly, would be a pretty building-specific question, I think, because we all use different companies to make our yearbooks.
Eric, I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So at the high school level, with regard to pictures, it's obviously a little different. We don't have class pictures, but we have individual pictures of students, and we are going to proceed with that. We have a date right now that's tentatively set in late October. We are working with, obviously, central office and the health department to see if that's going to be a feasible date, but social distancing guidelines would all be followed during the picture process. It's a little trickier when you get to sports teams, clubs, and activities, because typically those pictures are close contact pictures. So we're working on how we're going to address those and hopefully push those pictures back a little bit toward winter or spring. As for yearbooks, the yearbooks will be created. These companies have been very creative with regard to how they can put a product out there that people want to purchase, which helps everyone, obviously. So we will have yearbooks. How we distribute them is going to determine on what we look like in the spring, obviously. But we plan on putting a quality product out to the high school student with regard to the book that they'll probably keep for the rest of their lives.
And then the other part that I saw Mrs. Grasso asked about is safe activities that were planned are now canceled. That might be more specific to each building. Obviously, at the building level, we're trying our best to ensure that whatever we plan as a building level is safe for everyone, and encompasses all of our stakeholders, whether they're virtual or whether they're live. I know the hot topic at the elementary level, so I might jump down. I don't know, Ms. Pickus, Ms. Walker, if you don't want me to, is usually Halloween. So I know that we put on the agenda what was actually released yesterday, which is just the health guidelines for Halloween that the governor released yesterday. And if I draw your attention to the bottom of that sheet, it just shows you some examples of virtual things or socially distant ways to celebrate Halloween. Obviously, Halloween is a Saturday this year, so it's a little different for everyone at home. At the elementary level, we had our counselors, our SBSSs, get together and just come up with a plan of how we can celebrate fall or Halloween in a way that includes everybody. That includes the kids that are home all the time. That can include both cohorts. And what we came out with, what they came up with, and each school's doing the same thing, which involves Friday the 30th. The teachers in each classroom will hold a virtual meet party on their Google Meets with their class. And then for those parents and students that want to participate, each school will have a specific flip grid that our SBSSs will be sending out, where we can share our costumes for others to see. We certainly encourage you, if you partake in Halloween activities or festivities, to take a look at the governor's recommendations of what he says you can or shouldn't do, or maybe should consider. Obviously, we want to make sure that we at least recognize it, because it is one of those celebrations that we've always marked on our calendars for our elementary friends. So we're hoping that through that virtual meet and the flip grid, where we can share everyone's costumes, where students can do that at home without having the hindrance of a face mask in front of them. It can be done in a safe, controlled way. So that is something. There are definitely building-specific activities that go on throughout the fall that not every building does. So obviously, if you have ideas, I would definitely talk to your local or your school-based PTAs or PFOs or PTOs and let them know some of your ideas. And obviously, they'll work with that principal to see if there is a safe way to do it.
Yeah, I would just say that there is no one-size-fits-all directive that's been issued. It's more or less, though, that whatever activities we do plan, they have to be in accordance with the New Jersey Department of Health and the DOE guidelines for health and safety matters. So just work with your principals to see, what is possible, as Mr. Paulson said.
And I caution parents is the comparing thing that we like to do. Especially on social media. We tend to do that as parents. I can say that I'm guilty of it myself. But always just remember, like, there behind every decision, there's a lot that goes into it. And we don't want to certainly get rid of anything, but we also, our primary focus is safety here. And I would just say, encourage you to speak to your principals at our level. And we'll try to come up with a solution to make things safe and in a safe way for everyone.
This might be a good chance to segue into our district-wide fundraisers discussion, because it also is an activity that folks have been a little upset about, that they're not quite proceeding as normal.
So I can jump in there. I'm not exactly sure when we talk about district-wide fundraising, exactly what specific fundraising opportunities that were mentioned. But, again, like Ms. Pickett said, as far as those events taking place at the schools, we have to make sure that any event is in accordance with the NJDOH and the Board of Ed, the Department of Ed. So we are still reviewing all of those applications, and we're handling them on a case-by-case basis. If there's ways that we can proceed and still be in accordance with all the guidelines that are put out there, we are entertaining those and approving them. But again, we just have to make sure that whether it's the limit on people gathering inside or outside, the social distancing guidelines, we just have to take all of that into account. And obviously, it does look a lot different this year than it's ever looked in the past. So we are still reviewing them. The principals are sending the applications to me. I'm looking at them. We're having discussions, and I know a lot of the times the principals are going back to whoever filed the application and seeing that there's maybe an alternative way we can facilitate the fundraiser to happen. And as long as we're able to do that in a safe manner and still be in accordance with the guidelines that we have to follow, then we are approving them.
All right, terrific. And then I think the SATs is the next thing on the agenda, but I think we've kind of touched on that, I believe. Mr. Kirkpatrick, I think you kind of touched on the assessment tests.
Yeah, you know what? I did want to give a little more information. I have to apologize. In just a minute, there's going to be a voice announcement. We're dismissing our students in a staggered schedule, so we go on and dismiss by floor. So I'm going to have to just mute it in 1 second. But I did want to talk a little bit about testing. So there's been a lot of discussion related to high schools and SATs and ACTs. Sorry about that. We have 2 minutes before another announcement comes on. So being a parent of 3 teenagers, I understand the anxiety related to SATs. And regardless of what our colleges and universities do moving forward with regard to what is required, what's not, we want our students to take these tests. It's a great benchmark, and it's a good thing to have in your pocket as you start the college application process. So College Board had to cancel a few dates between North and South, end of the summer, early fall, due to being unable to secure proctors. So at Middletown High School South, we had to cancel our August 29th date. I believe High School North had to cancel the August 29th and the September 26th. That being said, we're moving forward. High School South offered SATs on the 26th of September and on October 3rd. We're scheduled for another test on December 5th, May 8th, and June 5th. For ACTs, we're holding them at High School South on October 24th and June 12th. As mentioned earlier, our PSATs are going to be offered in both high schools for all juniors on October 14th. At that time, sophomores, freshmen, and seniors will be home working virtually so that we can provide the opportunity for the students, the juniors, to take that test. High School North had an SAT this past weekend, which is the 3rd of October. They're also scheduled for November 7th, December 5th, March 13th, May 8th, and June 5th. Now, in the past, there was a waiting list. College Board had a waiting list. If someone backed out of an SAT seat, another parent who was waiting would be able to jump in for their child. That's not the case due to the pandemic. So at some point, hopefully, the waiting list is implemented again. But for now, if you're not signed up, you're not going to have an opportunity to take the test. Are there any questions related to the SAT?
I don't see anything in the chat, so I think we're good.
Okay, if anybody has any questions about SAT, I encourage them to reach out to the guidance department at the 2 high schools.
All right, terrific, thank you. Okay, in proceeding forward with the agenda, let's look at the Board of Ed update with Mrs. Rogers. Are you still here? I see you're off camera and on mute, but I wasn't sure. Pam? There you are.
Sorry, hi. Okay, so Board of Education update. Let me just switch gears here. I'm teaching my daughter's school, but she's on a little break. So we had our Malone and McBroom update, our demographic study, which was very thorough and excellent. If y'all can go back and look at it on the website, it's very helpful and extremely transparent, so we know exactly where we are in the strategic plan right now. They confirmed that our enrollment is going down, but there is some overcrowding at Thompson and South. There will be a lot of an increase in the population at, I believe it's Village and Fairview, because of 2 new developments. So all those developments that are in the process of taking place right now, that is incorporated into the demographic study, just so we're clear. So they've got all that information from the township. We had a couple of people reach out to us about the Navasink modular. The decrease in enrollment there was due to the modular and the special ed community being taken out of there. So that was a good couple emails that we got just to call attention to that. We did speak to Malone and McBroom about that, but just as a reminder, so next time they do the presentation, they will adjust the numbers for that. Yeah, that's all I really wanted to mention, was to look at the Malone and McBroom update, and then to congratulate Pat Ranella, our new assistant superintendent, and to congratulate Devin Orozco as the director of staff development and special projects. I think it's wonderful that we're promoting from within. Couldn't be happier with Mrs. Walker, and I think the administration is just doing a killer job. This is such a difficult time. I mean, this is the biggest challenge that education has faced in America, maybe ever, this COVID-19, and I just think they're doing such a stellar job. So proud of them. Proud to be in Middletown right now.
Pam, we do have a question in the chat. I think you had mentioned something about Fairview School, and we're not exactly sure.
So because of, there are 2 developments that are going to affect the enrollment at Fairview and Village. It's just going to be more students coming in from these developments. Not to the point of overcrowding. It didn't say overcrowding, but just so we're aware that more children will be going into there, because when we talk about rezoning, and that we discussed on the survey, strategic planning survey, and the majority of people in Middletown did want us to rezone, we need to talk about where there's room to put the students, right? And so we want to talk about not overcrowding schools with students. And so that's the kind of thing we look forward to with for the future.
There was also a question in the chat. Will there be an asterisk for Navasink added to the demographic study and it resent out explaining so that the public is aware?
Yeah, so Malone and McBroom, they're going to do another update. I'm hoping maybe something at the October meeting, but definitely by the November meeting. And they'll give us different options to alleviate the overcrowding, and they will update those Navasink numbers. So there's not as much room as it looked like the other night in the presentation at Navasink, right? You know,
Mrs. Rogers, we spoke to Malone and McBroom a couple of times since the board meeting. The issue was the way that the percentages were the students, the movement of students was accounted for between buildings due to the change in special class programs across the district when the Navasink modulars were removed. It's just that the different weighting during the when they did the statistical analysis had to be readjusted. So it didn't really have that much of a big impact on the overall numbers because the students that movement was accounted for. They just had to revise their statistical weighting. So it was, I think Mrs. Walker, it was like a matter of maybe 8 to 10 students that in the long run it showed over the course of 10 years. Yeah. It may differ, but it'll be clarified at the next meeting.
And the next step is going to be to revisit the capacities. They call them functional capacities of each building. Right now, they've given us the enrollments. Next is to compare it to the capacities of the buildings. And then the third step would be to come up with the scenarios.
And the building principals are working on that as we speak, and we'll be meeting with them. Central office will be meeting with them, as well as representatives from Malone and McBroom to discuss the functional capacities. And that's really a change and that was something they suggested, and we welcome that. That's a change from how we've looked at it in the past, where we just looked at long-range facility plans, because those don't necessarily always represent the actual way in which space is being utilized. So those functional capacities will take all that into account, the actual use of space in our schools.
Oh, and there are 2 questions in the chat about redistricting lines, and should we expect to see a first draft, or will they present the new lines for redistricting? Redistricting is such a hard word at the next BOE meeting.
No, they're like I said, the next step is to compare the capacities, which we still have to develop, with the enrollments. Once that's done, because enrollments themselves don't tell the whole story, like we talked about the classroom. You have to know what the capacity of each building is. Then you look at the enrollments and how it will progress throughout the next 5-10 years. At that point, we can start looking at, how the students that are in the building right now and projected to be in the building fit in the building, and come up with this, Malone and McBroom will come up with, the scenarios for us. So we're hoping that, will come in, the November, December time period. But first we have to get through the capacities, because that's the big chunk of what we're doing. It's a big piece of the puzzle.
Okay, and then there is another question in the chat about Navasink again. When will we learn what Navasink's new projection is, and will the full community be made aware, and are functional capacities taking into account whether the school has spaces for specials, classes, and special services?
Yeah, so like I said, at the next board meeting, we'll have that updated information for Navasink. It's not that different, quite honestly, because again, it was accounted for. It's just a recalculation of the statistical weighting to a very complicated algorithm. I'm not a probability and statistic expert, but having listened to the way that they do this as demographers, it's very interesting. So that will be discussed at the next board meeting. And in terms of functional capacities and whether or not they take into account space for special class specials and special services, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. What we're looking at is the overall functional use of the building, the space that's available. It's kind of like if you go to build a house, you want to build 3,000 square foot house, say for example, that's a rounded number. Then you figure out, well, how, am I going to have a great room, or am I going to have a living room and a separate dining room? So Right now, we're just trying to get overall available space, and then because the way Malone and McBroom have explained it to us, that's a much more logical step, and then you look at how you will utilize that space. So right now, we're just doing that. We're capturing the actual capacity information.
But to your point, we are looking at where, I mean, when it comes to the scenarios, where our special programs are housed is going to be a driver. It will be it won't be an afterthought.
Okay. And there is a question here about when the change will happen at Fairview, but I believe it's going to have to do more with whenever the developments are finished and how many people move into them. I know for sure there was townhouses that were built up the street from me that everybody expected to really impact the Fairview population. This was a number of years ago, and it really didn't. So, I guess it's kind of it's a moving target. You never exactly know exactly what's going to happen.
Correct. These are all projections at this point when it comes to the new development. But my understanding, Mrs. Walker, is that it's a multi-year phase-in and impact on the district, because the new communities will be come on the housing units in those new communities will come online at different times.
And the housing units that will affect Village obviously are already being built. They're in construction, so that will come on before the Fairview. If you look at the Fairview projections, they don't start going up until year 4 or 5. That's I think that's from my memory. They're not coming online and won't really impact us for a few years. Now, doesn't mean that we still have to consider that. We have to build that into our plan. But just so you know, the Village construction development is going to impact us much sooner than the Fairview.
Yeah. And there was a question related to that. Does the planning board in Middletown involve the administration or Board of Ed before they approve the application and permit for any new building or construction that goes on?
The district is not involved in that. There is a planning board decision.
Yeah. And then I have a question. Is the study taking into account the new changes due to COVID? I'm not sure what CV stands for. Influx of New Yorkers, students leaving for private school options. Is it taking into account individual single homes being built here and there? So I'm not exactly sure what CV is. I guess that's COVID. But I
think they mean the 300 students who left to go to private schools, but they might return, or they left to go to homeschool, Mary Ellen. I think that's what they're talking about.
I'm not the demographer, so I can't answer all these questions as a demographer, but my understanding is they're going off trends and calculations that demographer uses, the formulas that they use. So, I mean, I think when Malone and McBroom make their presentation at the next board meeting, that these questions be asked directly to them, so I mean, we can ask them too, but you'll get a more educated answer from them. Right now, I personally, I don't believe there are statistics to show how that growth, is growing, because they do look historically. They don't look at a year. They look at multiple years. They use factors that are, part of their industry. These projections, so they can explain it much better. They do look at individual housing units. They did look at how many housing units came online, how many housing units switched from single family owned homes to rental units, how many switched from rental units to family owned homes. They do look at all that. As far as the change due to people moving in because of the pandemic and perhaps moving out of the city, that one I can't answer.
Okay, and there was one general question. Where are we with total enrollment this year versus last year?
Our total enrollment is down, and as Ms. Rogers did mention, we have quite a few students who have opted to go to private school or home instruction for this year. Now, we may see a migration back, I'm hoping, once the pandemic is over. Some of the private schools have opened full-time. Some of them have closed for 14 or more days too. So that was a parent's choice to do that, and so we did see some reduction this year because of that.
Okay. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I don't know if there's, we might want to move a little forward. Pam, are you done, or do you have anything else, or?
I'm done. Yeah, just a shout out to really look at that full presentation online because it's really helpful. I mean, there's even a pie chart that shows you all the different developments, and that there's not much more development going on after a certain point. So that's helpful too, to look at within the 5 years and think about that. It was a really good presentation. Thank you.
Okay, you know what we'll do is we'll put a link to the presentation on the PIC page after the meeting so that folks can get it easily. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so now let's move forward. Chris, if you would promote Dr. Saffert to presenter so that we can have her speak to Middletown Friends of Diverse Learners. Heather, you can, I don't know if you need to share.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I don't know if you need to share your screen, but you're a presenter, so you can do whatever you need.
Okay, great. Thanks for allowing me to talk today. I want to, first of all, thank our candidates and community for a successful Meet the Candidates night last night. We posted the recording on our Facebook page. We have also posted introductory videos of the candidates on our Facebook page and have linked them to our YouTube channel. We did not receive pre-recorded videos from all candidates, but so everybody knows, we did invite all candidates to the event and asked for pre-recorded videos. So our one agenda item is that we have a parents meeting coming up Monday, October 19th at 7 p.m. and we encourage parents to attend. It will be held via Zoom, and you know, we definitely want to hear about how your experience is going with the reopening, and you know, need parent input to relay back to the administration. So that's it for right now.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, and then we're closing out the agenda. New business, as you can see, folks, I have put on the page the link to the PIC reps and the parent organization presidents. Hopefully that's completely up to date. If it's not, please give me a holler and I'll go ahead and update that. And then we have, at the end of the agenda, you'll see a link to the Halloween celebrations that Mr. Paulson actually made reference to. So we will actually put that on the PIC page as well. If there are no other questions before we wind up the meeting, I want to thank everybody for our first virtual meeting of the school year. You all know my email. If you have any issues or problems or concerns you want to bring to the administration, please feel free to email me. You know, Mrs. Walker, Mrs. Pickus, everyone's very responsive. We will definitely, if we can't get you an answer at the meeting, we will get you an answer before the meeting. And I just want to thank everybody for their participation. Be well, take care, and looking forward to see everybody next month.